Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Climate Business Plan Community Meeting webinar. Thanks to all who took the time to join us. I am Melissa Adams, Assistant Vice President for Climate Strategy Policy and Commercialization for Washington Gas Light, and I will be serving as your moderator. Before we begin, I would like to say that it has been truly heartening to see the generous community support for our company as we mark 175 years of service this year, a celebration that has spurred record fundraising for the Washington Area Fuel Fund, affectionately known as WAF, that helps neighbors in need stay warm. WAF helps residents across the Washington Gas service territory pay for any kind of heating fuel, whether gas, oil, electricity, or wood pellets. If you'd like to contribute to WAF, you may do so by visiting wafhelp.org and select Give Help to get started. Everything you donate, 100% will go to help those in need. As we get started, let's take part in a Washington Gas tradition and begin our meeting with a safety minute. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Lucia Montealegre, Senior Sales Engineer, who will share a few points on winter safety.
Hola, soy Lucía Montealegre y este es un mensaje de seguridad de Washington Gas. Considere estos consejos de seguridad para caminar al aire libre durante otoño e invierno, durante el clima frío y lluvioso y cuando oscurezca más temprano. Si el clima está lluvioso y las temperaturas están cerca del punto de congelación, tenga cuidado al caminar debido a la posibilidad de superficies congeladas. Además, tenga en cuenta que las hojas mojadas pueden estar resbaladizas. Tenga en cuenta de que las áreas mojadas y oscuras del pavimento pueden estar muy resbaladizas debido al congelamiento de hielo. Cuando camine al aire libre, use los zapatos adecuados. Para caminar con estabilidad y mantener equilibrio en superficies irregulares que pueden estar mojadas y resbaladizas, use zapatos con suelas de buena tracción. Cuando esté mojado, especialmente cuando haya nieve, no tome atajos. Manténganse en caminos limpios, libres de nieve y hielo. Use el paso peatonal cuando vaya a cruzar la calle. En días lluviosos o con nieve, camine despacio y lentamente si es necesario, asegurándose que sus pies apunten hacia afuera. Utilice los pasamanos al subir o bajar escalones, especialmente cuando esté mojado o congelado. Tenga mucha precaución al ingresar y salir de su automóvil. Entre los vehículos estacionados puede haber hielo. La nieve también puede ocultar el hielo. Mientras entre o salga del automóvil, sujete una mano a la puerta del automóvil o, si es necesario, sujete otra mano en otra parte del automóvil. Esto le ayudará a mantener su equilibrio durante el proceso de transición. Y, al caminar, mantente visible. Use ropa con colores llamativos durante el día y ropa reflectante cuando esté oscuro.
Thank you, Lucia. We're gathering today for an update on our efforts to tackle climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. In March of 2020, Washington Gas filed its climate business plan with the District of Columbia Public Service Commission. In it, we provided a framework for how we can help the district achieve its climate goals, reducing greenhouse gas emissions and becoming carbon neutral by 2050, which the district is now targeting for achievement by 2045. After developing the climate business plan, we put together our 5-year climate action plans and also provided a 30-year climate action roadmap, both of which were filed with the DC Public Service Commission. We are also focusing on the need and opportunity to reduce emissions from transportation. The benefits include helping to reduce climate change, but also achieving reductions in other pollutants and particulate matter that pose air quality and health risks, particularly to vulnerable populations. As we begin, please note that the information we are presenting is based on the information known to us at this time, and a more detailed disclaimer is being shown on the screen. Here is our agenda for the evening. Should you have questions, please submit them using the Q&A function. You can ask at any time during the meeting, and we will answer them after the update and panel discussion. All microphones are now muted and cameras are disabled. With that, it's my pleasure to share an update on our efforts to address climate since our last meeting.
Today, we'll share the progress we've made since our meeting on August 30th. We'll provide updates on initiatives in 3 core areas on which our climate business plan is centered. Maximizing energy efficiency. This was discussed at our last meeting. Enhancing infrastructure and operations, and harnessing lower carbon fuel sources. First, a quick update on each of the pillars of our plan. And then, tonight we'll shift our focus to supply and lower carbon fuel sources. This includes the types of mix and gases that we deliver. Washington Gas's Project Pipes program is the centerpiece of our infrastructure modernization effort in the District of Columbia. It focuses on enhancing safety while also reducing greenhouse gas emissions and improving the reliability and resiliency of the district's energy infrastructure by replacing aging pipe in the distribution system. Doing so will result in a safer system with fewer leaks, which has the added benefit of reducing fugitive emissions that are attributable to older pipe materials. From its launch in 2014 through 2022, replacing older pipe with modern pipe in D.C. has enabled a cumulative reduction equivalent to approximately 24,000 metric tons of CO2 emissions. We are continuing our explorations into advanced leak detection. For the last several meetings, we've discussed progress in our pilot projects to increase our ability to identify and address leaks. As we shared last August, after deploying satellite imaging that was paired with advanced data analytics, we determined that although this method offered many advantages, at this time it would best be used as a part of a suite of leak detection efforts. We have now entered into a second pilot effort, working with 2 vendors, ABB and Picaro, that use vehicle-mounted detection equipment. We're continuing our evaluation as how to best utilize these technologies to efficiently find leak indications and information to prioritize replacement projects, and expect to provide an update at our next meeting. In every case, whenever the equipment detects a leak, the company further investigates with work crews that ground truth the leak area by using handheld equipment that take additional measurements at the identified emission sites. By comparing what was measured by the mobile detection units with information obtained by the ground crews, Washington Gas is working with its vendors to refine measurement, accuracy, and pipeline replacement prioritization. Every 2 months, the company reports the results of its findings to the Public Service Commission. The company has also deployed drawdown compressors to capture and re-inject gas into the pipeline system during certain repair, maintenance, and replacement activities. Since 2016, the company has used drawdown compressor technology more than 250 times, preventing more than 2 million standard cubic feet of natural gas from entering the atmosphere. In 2022, the last full year for which we have data, the use of this technology avoided the release of 390,800 standard cubic feet of natural gas, the equivalent of 196 metric tons of CO2 emissions. That is the same as taking 43 passenger vehicles off the road for the same 1-year period. When drawdown compressors cannot be used, the company utilizes flaring, which avoided the release of an additional 84 metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions on a system-wide basis in 2022. The company also piloted its first vacuum into service effort earlier this summer. Whereas the drawdown compressors are generally used during planned repair, vacuum technology is used when new pipe is put into service. The equipment vacuums air out of the pipe so that it can be filled with natural gas. This avoids the need to flush air-gas mixes into the atmosphere during the commissioning process for new pipe sections. Washington Gas is working with the Gas Technology Institute to enhance the use of this technology. The result of these efforts are helping the company to continue to explore and refine additional approaches for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. As of this meeting, we are still awaiting and hopeful for approval of our proposal that is pending before the D.C. Public Service Commission that would allow D.C. residents and businesses to access energy efficiency programs that reduce energy bills and greenhouse gas emissions. These proposed programs were highlighted during our August 30 meeting, and you can find this information at WashingtonGasClimateBusinessPlan.com. There you will find links to the previous public meetings. The type of gas that we deliver heavily influences certain categories of what are called Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions, specifically customer usage of our delivered product and emissions associated with the extraction and production of natural gas. Emissions from these Scope 3 sources far exceed the emissions we directly control and that relate to our operations and infrastructure, which fall into the category known as Scope 1. Given the importance of Scope 3 emissions, we are taking action to lower emissions associated with the largest part of the value chain, the supply we purchase and deliver on behalf of our customers. For this winter heating season, our target is to have between 20 and 30% of the gas we purchase for customers be certified gas. That would correspond to between 8 and 12% of the total fuel we deliver to customers. Since many large customers, like the federal and District of Columbia governments, procure their own supply. Today we'll be discussing a number of different gaseous fuels that all contribute to lowering greenhouse gas emissions. We'll start with what is ready now and then discuss some of the more forward-looking efforts we're making. As concerns are raised about how we'll meet today's energy needs, let alone the additional future needs, there are actions we can and must take now to reduce emissions that are contributing to climate change. Such action can be taken without compromising the availability of energy when and where it's needed, especially during peak winter demand periods, whether they be during the hottest days of summer or the coldest days of winter. Climate science tells us that emissions remain in the atmosphere for years and therefore have a compounding effect on climate change. Therefore, timely emission reductions are important. Reducing methane emissions from upstream oil and gas extracting and processing is among the most viable and significant actions we can take in the near term to help address climate change. We're continuing to procure gas with very low carbon intensity ratings. A carbon intensity rating is calculated based on the volume of greenhouse gas emissions generated to produce a unit of gas. EPA's national average is 1.4%. Washington Gas is procuring gas that has been certified by third parties to achieve an emissions intensity of 0.2%, representing an emissions intensity that is approximately 85% below the national average. For this winter heating season from November 23rd until March 24th, we expect to procure 50,000 decatherms of certified natural gas. In addition to emissions reductions associated with conventional natural gas, we're also shifting to new fuels with lower carbon intensity. Another fuel that is ready now, and one of our key focus areas, is RNG, or renewable natural gas. One of the main advantages of RNG is that it's fully interchangeable with natural gas without requiring new infrastructure to deliver it or new equipment to use it. It's most commonly produced from treated biogas that is a byproduct of our local communities, as in gases produced from wastewater facilities and landfills. It's commonly produced from the food that we discard, as well as from waste produced by dairy, hog, or chicken farms. There's a growing interest in RNG around the country, with activity in 38 states to promote the use of RNG in the residential or commercial sector through either legislative, regulatory, or utility-led action. In fact, some states have instituted a renewable natural gas portfolio standard, which mandates the delivery of a certain volume of renewable natural gas. This policy structure is akin to the renewable portfolio standard used in the District of Columbia that procures renewable energy credits that stimulate the use of renewable energy production. Close to home, we've seen a strong and growing interest in RNG in our area. Our water and landfill operators share our view that methane shouldn't be released, but instead should be productively harnessed. In addition, several of our local jurisdictions also are very interested in capturing and using RNG. Prince George's and Loudoun counties issued requests for information from interested firms and vendors that specialize in the implementation of alternative energy projects for greenhouse gas emission reductions that will address the county's desire to incorporate green hydrogen and landfill gas from the county's landfill to reduce the county's greenhouse gas emissions. Arlington County also released a similar RFI last month. Because of the benefits of productively using waste gas, this is where our immediate efforts have been focused. We recently shared information about our agreement to source RNG from Washington Suburban Sanitation Commission's Piscataway plant. RNG has benefits in multiple thermal uses, but is especially valuable in transportation. The interconnection Washington Gas has created with Piscataway is helping to enable the operation of a zero-emission bus fleet in Montgomery County, Maryland. Gases from landfills are often the primary source of methane emissions in our region. Maryland's state greenhouse gas emissions inventory estimates that landfills contribute to 37% of statewide greenhouse gas emissions and 42% of the state's total methane emissions. The 2020 District of Columbia Emissions Inventory attributes 455,712 tons of greenhouse gas emissions directly to the district's waste facilities. For context, that is the same amount of emissions produced by more than 101,000 passenger vehicles driving over 1.6 billion miles a year. The District of Columbia has recognized the environmental impacts that landfills have on the environment and the contributions they make to greenhouse gas emissions loading. In fact, as part of the Zero Waste Omnibus Amendment Act of 2020, the district aims to divert 60% of food waste from landfills by 2032. During our satellite leak detection study that we mentioned earlier, we visually confirmed the presence of large sources of biomethane in the district at locations such as Blue Plains and the Fort Totten Transfer Station that could potentially be captured, cleaned, and injected into the Washington Gas system for beneficial purposes. According to the EPA Environmental Impacts of Food Waste report, food waste is the single most common material landfilled in the U.S., comprising 24% of landfilled solid waste. That's why we're so delighted to announce our latest RNG interconnection with the Prince William County Landfill. In partnership with Washington Gas Light Company and Prince William RNG LLC, a subsidiary of Opal Fuels Incorporated, the Prince William County Landfill is developing a project to upgrade all of the landfill gas it produces to pipeline-quality RNG for sale to Washington Gas and other parties. Washington Gas will facilitate its delivery by injecting the gas into its natural gas distribution system. Opal is a highly experienced developer of RNG projects throughout the country, with 8 landfill projects in operation and another 6 in construction. The landfill is 500 feet high at its peak, covers 1,000 acres, and accepts more than 430,000 tons of waste per year. In operation for more than a decade, the landfill is expected to continue to accept waste for several more decades to come. Even after it reaches its maximum capacity and is closed, the landfill will still provide a source of renewable natural gas as the waste in it continues to break down. The net benefit of this project is estimated to result in the elimination of more than 50,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent per year. Overall emissions will be approximately 30% less than current levels. The same benefit is taking 11,000 passenger vehicles off the road every year. In addition, RNG produced from this project will be used to displace the fossil gas that Washington Gas uses to fuel approximately 250 natural gas fleet vehicles. While these vehicles already combust fuel that is lower in emissions than petroleum-based fuels, producing a fraction of the dangerous particulate matter as well, switching them to RNG will make driving the vehicles carbon neutral. At the same time that we're increasing our use of these existing fuels, we're also helping our region to usher in the next generation of lower carbon energy. In the last update, we shared that Washington Gas had participated as part of a cross-sector coalition of organizations in the Mid-Atlantic Hydrogen Hub. The coalition submitted a funding application to the U.S. Department of Energy to establish a regional clean hydrogen hub spanning Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. In all, 79 hub applications were submitted to the Department of Energy, and 7 were selected, which highlights strong continuing support for hydrogen in multiple use cases and its overall potential to deliver gaseous energy to support a lower carbon economy. The federal government selected 7 regional hydrogen hubs, and we're disappointed to share that our application was not one of them. However, our interest is not diminished. There remains strong support of our many regional partners in pursuing delivery and usage of hydrogen. At the same time, there is some good news. ALA Renewable Energy, also part of the Alta Gas family, will be supporting the Pacific Northwest Hub for Washington State, Oregon, and Montana. And we'll learn from our colleagues' experience. Similarly, we continue to engage with GTI and are collaborating with peer gas distribution companies as they pursue investigations into different aspects of thermal hydrogen usage. For the introduction of hydrogen into any system, there are two initial questions that need to be answered. At what concentrations is hydrogen compatible with our delivery infrastructure? And if not, what modifications would need to be made to make it compatible? And more importantly for consumers, is it compatible with the appliances and equipment they already own? Washington Gas continues to explore both questions by learning from other gas companies and technical research institutes. Northwest Natural Gas has been conducting real-world research to determine maximum hydrogen blending levels that they can safely add to their pipelines without significant modifications to its distribution system or customers' appliances. In 2021, they started testing using a 5% blend at their state-of-the-art training facility in Sherwood, Oregon, and have confirmed that it will work for their system. Now they're testing the blend on end-use equipment, including furnaces, fireplaces, and water heaters. Similar activities are underway in a number of other locations, including Columbia Gas of Pennsylvania and New Jersey Natural Resources. At the same time, we have some good progress to report relating to the use of hydrogen to facilitate zero-emissions transportation. Washington Gas coordinated a successful nomination and approval of key interstate highways in Virginia as hydrogen alternative fuel corridors by the Federal Highway Administration and Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. This will open up federal funding opportunities for state and county authorities to seek hydrogen fueling infrastructure grants. We're also working with several county transit authorities to support pilot development of hydrogen fuel cell electric buses. By working throughout the year in support of multimodal opportunities for lower carbon transportation, we are helping pave the way for reduced transportation emissions.
At this time, I would like to introduce the three experts joining us on this evening's panel. Tanya Peacock serves as Managing Director at Echo Engineers California office and leads their fast-growing hydrogen practice. She's a well-known energy champion, and she currently serves as chair of the California Hydrogen Business Council. She's played a key role in the development of foundational clean energy and climate policies in California. Before joining Echo Engineers, Ms. Peacock led policy teams with Bloom Energy, Sempra Energy, and SoCalGas, with a particular focus on renewable natural gas. Our next panelist is Dr. Tristan Brown, an independent consultant working for Washington Gas. Dr. Brown earned his PhD in biorenewable resources and technology at Iowa State University and holds a JD from the University of Missouri. He serves as the director of the Bioeconomy Development Institute and associate professor of energy resource economics at the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse, New York. He brings 14 years of experience conducting systems analyses such as life cycle and techno-economic analysis of bio-based pathways, including the production of renewable natural gas in the RNG market. Welcome, Dr. Brown. Next is my colleague David Lewis, Vice President, Business Development for Washington Gaslight. Mr. Lewis has more than 30 years' experience across the conventional and renewable energy sectors with both independent power companies and utilities. His background includes financing more than $7 billion of power plants and over 15,000 megawatts of commercial transactions. His works included leadership roles in finance, asset management, origination, energy trading, and project acquisition, as well as all areas of business development, energy policy, and commercial strategy. To get started this evening, what is renewable natural gas?
Renewable natural gas is described as or defined as pipeline compatible gaseous fuel that comes from biogenic or other renewable sources that has a lower life cycle carbon dioxide equivalent, and that's CO2 emissions, than geologic natural gas. So it's completely interchangeable with traditional natural gas. It just comes from renewable sources. When you burn RNG, it does emit CO2, but the really important thing to consider is the alternative. And the alternative to RNG oftentimes is just methane, pure methane being vented directly to atmosphere. So that methane could be coming from landfill facilities or wastewater treatment facilities or, dairies. And the reason why it's important to capture that methane and put it to beneficial use is that methane has a much larger global warming potential than CO2 does. So if you look at it on a 100-year time scale, methane has 28 times, it's 28 times worse for the environment than just CO2. And if you look at it on a 20-year time scale, it's 84 times more potent. And this is important because we're all aware that emissions reductions in the next 10 years are of primary importance. We need to get all of the emissions reductions that we can get. And so capturing methane from organic sources and putting it to beneficial uses is really one of the best things we can do for the climate.
So Tristan, I understand that RNG can come from a number of different sources: landfills, wastewater treatment, farms. Is it all the same when it comes to emissions?
The way to look at it is, there are certain sources such as at farms where you're going to have manure lagoons that are emitting methane today. And so using that, to converting that to RNG, capturing that methane and destroying it as RNG is going to achieve a very large reduction compared to some of the smaller sources such as a wastewater treatment plant where that methane is already being captured and destroyed. Still has a benefit, but it's not going to be as large of a benefit as you would get with a farm and say a dairy farm, for example.
So I understand that our analysis indicated that we will achieve an approximately 30% reduction in the emissions of greenhouse gases when using RNG from the landfill facility. Can you walk us through some of the details about how do you calculate that benefit?
We look at everything going into the facility, everything coming out of the facility, and looking at the overall greenhouse gas impacts for that entire system. And so with this particular project, the landfill is currently producing landfill gas, which is primarily comprised of methane. That landfill gas is being captured. Some of it's being used to generate electricity. The rest of it's being flared. And the reason it's flared is because landfill gas, as primarily methane, if it's allowed to escape into the atmosphere, methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. And so in the US, the government has required that that methane be captured and destroyed. So when you destroy it, it converts the methane to carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a much weaker greenhouse gas. But what that ultimately means is when you flare that methane, you're not getting any energy value out of it. There's no financial value to it. And it's really it's kind of wasted energy at the end of the day. And so projects such as this one, they provide a big benefit to the climate in the sense that they take what is currently wasted energy and they put that to better use. And by putting it to better use, you are then displacing an existing fossil source of energy. So I mentioned that some of this landfill gas is currently being used to produce electricity. Well, a new source of electricity will need to be generated in order to meet that demand because that electricity is now going to be converted instead to a transportation fuel instead of electricity. But what that means as well is that there's other ways that you can generate electricity that are also going to reduce the climate impacts of projects such as this one. And so if, for example, this project were to get its new electricity from a renewable source of electricity, such as solar PV or wind, then that is not going to create any new greenhouse gas emissions. And so you ultimately, we say 30% approximately, but that number could be larger depending on what the source of that electricity would be.
So it's almost like you create a ledger, if you will, of debits and credits for your greenhouse gas emissions and then net it out to see what your benefit's going to be.
That's a really good way to look at it. We call it greenhouse gas accounting, and it's very similar to your standard financial accounting practices.
Dave, a question for you. Can you give us a little sense of the sort of scale of the landfill? What kind of production is it capable of? And can you put that in some sort of context for us?
Sure. The landfill is one of the largest in our service territory at Prince William County. And in terms of the RNG output that it has, it's about 4,000 decatherms a day. And that represents roughly about the equivalent energy of 20,000 homes usage.
Wow, that's quite a number of homes. As we look out beyond Prince William County and we look at the region, I know we see a number of RFPs coming out in terms of other wastewater treatment facilities, landfills, also interested. Can you speak a little more to the opportunity from other waste facilities in our region?
Absolutely. One of the most exciting things about this particular project is it is the first landfill being used for RNG. And we see the potential for several others across our service territory, both in Maryland, as well as in Virginia, as well as even in DC. So there's tremendous potential given that we're such a popular area in terms of population density, and all that waste that would traditionally be wasted is actually going to be put to RNG, and we think there's several that are have great potential.
So have we responded to any interest with respect to these other facilities?
Yes, we've seen interest from other counties trying to pursue similar types of projects. There's actually been some requests for information that have been sent out into the market for entities to look to developing a new project at these RNG facilities. There's an RFP from Arlington. They have an RFI out actually that we're in the process of responding to, and Prince George's County also has an RFI and is looking to go to an RFP. So those are some of the two that we're currently aware of and currently working on.
Well, with respect to looking back at some of the analysis we did in relation to the climate business plan, we had low carbon fuels playing an important role, and again, renewable natural gas in particular. Is our focus now primarily on connecting facilities in our region?
Yes, we have a great potential for a number of different facilities within our region. So taking that locally produced waste and turning it into energy. There's a number of different wastewater facilities. There's the landfills that I mentioned. There's actually some emerging opportunities with utilizing the food waste. So all of those projects, depending upon their volumes and their economics, have the potential to be tied into our system that we have today and start flowing RNG across our service territory.
And I understand that since we are a pipeline system that's connected to other pipeline systems, and we are really a giant interconnected energy resource, there also may be potential to access supplies outside of our region as well.
Definitely, there's opportunities outside our footprint and our particular market. There are hundreds of different projects being contemplated all across the United States. And because, like you said, we have such an integrated network, the molecules themselves can all tie together through our pipeline system. The whole system itself has a lot of value by giving you that flexibility to tap in resources across the whole system and utilize them.
So, Dave, you just mentioned that there's been a tremendous growth in the number of renewable natural gas facilities. Tristan, I'm going to ask you, what do you think stimulates that growth? What's needed to continue that growth?
So there's a major recognition worldwide, and I think we're seeing this, with the ongoing COP conference, that we have to reduce methane emissions very quickly. But it's also a major opportunity. Methane is a short-lived greenhouse gas, and so even though it's a very potent greenhouse gas, if you reduce it, you can take very rapid steps to helping, prevent catastrophic climate change. And so as part of this, we're seeing major initiatives internationally, nationally, at state level to reduce methane emissions, whether that's biogenic methane emissions, such as we'd see from a landfill, or fossil methane emissions. So, when we look at the system, there's a lot of very, very simple ways to reduce methane emissions, reduce leakage. WGL, for example, is doing a lot of work with certified gas, where it's focused on actually reducing emissions associated with that existing natural gas. And so that's one of the more immediate steps. And then when we think about displacing that and starting to utilize renewable resources such as renewable natural gas, that's another major initiative to help reduce emissions.
Great, thank you. That makes me think, Dave, is there anything local in terms of policy initiatives that we're seeing?
Oh, absolutely, Melissa. Prince William County was basically built and developed around the Virginia Energy Innovation Act, which was a piece of legislation passed in 2022. And it allows the utilities to have an equity stake or an ownership partnership inside the asset themselves, which is something that we hadn't done before. So it can range from the interconnect itself, how the project ties into our pipeline system, to further up the value chain in terms of the actual production of the RNG itself. So it's a great piece of legislation. It really puts the utility to do, what we do best, which is interconnecting projects, allowing us to operate these projects, managing these types of capital assets. And we believe it can be leveraged to, make that same value across multiple different projects.
Tristan, at the national level, as we look across the landscape at other states, if there are other policies also stimulating RNG production and use. It's my understanding that some states have something like akin to a renewable portfolio standard, or can you elaborate or share any information about those sorts of policies?
Yes, so there's a lot of really exciting developments taking place in that regard. The entire West Coast now, the states of California, Oregon, and Washington have you referred to it as a renewable portfolio standard. It's kind of a renewable portfolio standard for fuels used in the transportation sector. It's alternatively called either a low carbon fuel standard or a clean fuel standard, depending on the state you're in. And the purpose of that is to really reduce fossil transportation fuel consumption by using renewable fuels. And renewable natural gas has played a very, very heavy role in all of those states, but especially California. And that's really starting to displace a lot of their fossil greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector. Something else California has done, because they've seen how successful this has been in the transportation sector, is they've also started to require that renewable natural gas be blended by gas utilities into their existing natural gas supply.
Yes, an excellent point, because as we know, the renewable portfolio standard for the electricity sector really was very important in terms of expanding the use and bringing down the cost of electricity from wind and solar resources in particular. And so looking at the gas side, there are several states that have programs in place to encourage or in some cases even require gas utilities to buy increasing amounts of renewable natural gas as a replacement to displace some of the natural gas that they're transporting in their systems.
I understand that renewable natural gas is typically more expensive than fossil gas. So can you talk to us a little bit about how we're managing this cost, how it integrates with our overall strategy, and how we can keep costs affordable for customers while also addressing greenhouse gas emissions?
No question at all that renewable natural gas is more expensive than traditional fossil gas, given the infrastructure that's involved and the capital investment. But our expectation and our hope is that we'll continue to march down that cost curve over time, similar to the way electricity came down the cost curve. The first renewable electric projects were extremely expensive, but then with proper incentives that can move the market in a particular direction towards helping to lower those costs, there's great potential for RNG to do the same thing.
Tristan, do you have anything to add too about the cost of RNG and some perspective you can add?
There's two important additional points to consider, in addition to what Dave's referring to. I think the first one is, there's a major climate benefit being provided by RNG. We don't necessarily always think about that when we're just comparing, $1 versus another dollar, but we know climate change is going to be expensive. We know it's already being expensive, right? Anyone that's been following the extreme weather events going on around the world, we know that this is incurring costs today, and those costs are only going to get higher in the future. And so, in the climate policy field, we refer to that as the social cost of carbon. And so that's one of the really big advantages to renewable sources like RNG is they provide a climate benefit. And so even though they might look more expensive, on a dollar per dollar basis, there's also going to be a major financial benefit that they're providing to the world moving forward as we think about decarbonizing. The second aspect that we have to consider is, the big picture. We really need to spend every dollar that we're spending to decarbonize. We need to spend that as cost effectively as we possibly can. And that really means we need to utilize our existing infrastructure wherever we can. And that's really one of the big appeals to RNG projects is because they are fully integrated with our existing infrastructure. Not only can we start decarbonizing very quickly, when we compare that to, say building several gigawatts of offshore wind farms and transmission lines, connecting those and utility scale batteries to overcome their intermittency, that's going to take time. That's going to cost a lot of money. RNG offers a way to start decarbonizing now while we wait to get to those other additional steps.
What does that mean for customers?
That's one of the big benefits of RNG is that it is completely interchangeable. Chemically, it is no different than what we have in our system. So customers receiving this gas don't have to worry about changing their equipment, changing their lifestyle in any way to accommodate this renewable natural gas. And for Washington Gas side, we take very seriously the safety involved in this. And so we carefully look at what this RNG has, its constituents, make sure that those are cleaned out along the way, and that before it ever touches our pipeline system, it meets the exact same quality standards as all the other gas that we have on our system.
There's a great deal of concern in our area on environmental justice matters. Can you talk to us about how this facility relates to environmental justice, what kinds of impacts it might have, and/or possibly benefits?
One of the big advantages to renewable natural gas is it is a very clean burning fuel. And that's especially true when you look at the applications it's most commonly used in today, which is heavy duty transportation. So, when we think heavy duty transportation, we are talking about large vehicles that are very unlikely to be electrified anytime soon. And so we're going to continue to use fuels in those, and they're especially diesel engines. And so we can take RNG and in converted vehicles, compressed natural gas or liquefied natural gas vehicles, use that RNG and displace the diesel engines. And so what that means is not only are you displacing the fuel that's going into those engines, but diesel engines tend to be, fairly high, large sources of emissions like particulate matter, sulfur, a lot of other emissions that negatively affect human health. They're not greenhouse gases, but they have a very negative impact on human health, especially when people in those communities are breathing in that particulate matter. So RNG, when you displace those diesel engines, start displacing the diesel fuel with RNG, you are effectively cleaning up the air by using RNG in place of that, and you're reducing the emissions that have historically been a major problem in a lot of those communities.
Dave, is there anything that you'd like to add?
One of the things about this particular project is that Opal Fuels is our counterpart, and they are one of the largest CNG transportation companies in the United States. They have a vast network of CNG facilities to fuel up those heavy-duty trucks that Tristan mentioned. In addition, WGL, we feel that we're going to use part of this RNG that from this project that we're buying is going to be used to power our own WGL fleet vehicles.
So just a follow-up, would we make it available at any of our public-facing CNG stations?
We certainly can. It can be part of the overall, RNG mix that comes through those stations as well. And that's certainly the intent.
So good evening, everyone. I'd just like to encourage you, if you haven't already submitted a question, please do so through the Q&A feature. And we will pause for a minute while we consolidate some of our questions and be back with you just in one moment. Let's see what's coming in here. Okay, we are getting a question. Our first question asks about, in light of the recent U.S. announcement at COP28, focusing on reducing methane emissions from the oil and gas sector, how does Washington Gas's climate business plan support those commitments? So I think that essentially what we're seeing out of COP is really very validating with respect to the approach that we're taking, because they are really looking at instituting best practices around extraction for oil and gas to reduce methane emissions and recognizing the importance there. And so, again, we started really leveraging our buying power at the company to work with companies, select companies that had a similar commitment, and get our production through those who've been certified for best practice through third parties. So that's what we call certified gas. And, it's somewhat novel, let's just say, in the US industry right now. But I think with the commitments we see at COP and what others are doing here in the US, as well as some of the new standards that the Biden administration is putting in place, I think we're going to see, much more of this gas being produced with much lower emissions. So I think it's very much in line with what we anticipated and planned for going forward with respect to conventional gas sources. Let's see if we're getting something else. Okay. One of the questions is, people are familiar with the smell of natural gas, and will RNG change that? And so um, my short answer is no. I think in its very raw state, it might smell very different, more like waste perhaps, but the gas itself is processed and treated very carefully before it goes into the system. And like all sources of conventional natural gas, I'll ask Dave and Tristan to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we odorize it as well. I don't think we put anything into the system that doesn't have the sort of fresh scent of combustion gas, or which is a pretty standardized scent of, I'll just kindly call it rotten eggs to a certain degree. So I don't know, Dave or Tristan. Tristan's I see is on mute, but if you guys have anything to add, that's my understanding.
No, Melissa, you're spot on with that answer. We take that RNG that comes into our pipeline system and we odorize it just like any other gas that we have in our system. So customers at the other end will still get that very familiar rotten egg smell that you mentioned if if the RNG kind of goes through the pipeline system. So yeah, it's treated just the same as it is with any other gas that we receive.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Let's see. Okay. Can RNG be used in diesel-powered Generac generators? So could you displace diesel in a Generac system? Does anybody have I don't know if it has to be a natural gas generator, but
Yeah, I might touch on that because in my own home, I have a backup generator, so which actually runs off of propane. But yeah, there are generators that you can get that run off of natural gas, of which, as we mentioned, RNG is interchangeable with natural gas through the pipeline system. So that's definitely an option instead of going the diesel generator route.
Yeah, and I think where, an important point is, so certainly there's going to be some types of generators, dual fuel, where they can run off of either natural gas or diesel. And so in that case, yeah, you could directly replace the diesel with RNG. But I think the bigger issue is, frequently we will see RNG used in applications that diesel's normally used in. Now, doesn't mean it's the exact same combustion equipment, right? You look at a compressed natural gas vehicle that's been modified so it can run off of compressed natural gas instead of diesel fuel. And so that's where we talk about the displacement, even though it's not you're putting it into the exact same engine per se.
okay. And thanks. I'm getting another question about RNG and transportation. We have a desire over time to make use of it for thermal use, but it is, the question notes it's very popular for transportation, and asked why is that?
The short answer, and well, actually, Tanya, do you want to, because I know California has been a big part of this.
Thank you, Tristan. A big part of it is really the low carbon fuel standard in California and the value you can get, basically the credits you can earn using RNG in transportation.
Okay, so somewhat policy driven, and also the fact that my understanding is that, especially in heavy duty vehicles, there's a lot of practical benefit as well, in terms of being able to fuel quickly and things of that nature.
Exactly.
Let me see. So I'll just pause because I am not seeing any more questions. Let me just give the audience a moment and see if there's anything more. And if not, we are happy to give everybody back their time this evening, and are very grateful for your participation, your attention. And again, we will be posting a recording of this presentation on Washington Gas Climate Business Plan.com. So you can go to that site for any resources and to listen to these videos as well. And I'd like to thank our panel very much, Dave, Tristan, and Tanya, for their expertise and their contributions. And again, thank you to our audience for joining. So with that, I would say good night and thank you.